your heart in our city, in our churches, in our nation, literally around the globe.
The Gift of Prayer is a powerful new DVD that teaches us the importance of prayer. It's a great resource for your church or family, available for purchase or download from the AFA Cultural Institute at afastore.net.
Heavenly Father, we come before you, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, thanking you for bringing us to this momentous occasion in the life of your people and in the history of our world.
This city and its entire nation is a testament to the unbreakable spirit of the Jewish people.
70 years ago today, at this very moment, you fulfilled the prophecies of the prophets when regathered your people in this promised land.
The United States will always be a great friend of Israel and a partner in the cause of freedom and peace. May there be peace. May God bless this embassy. May God bless all who serve there. And may God bless the United States of America.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, welcome to a brand new week of broadcasting on American Family Radio on Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, and you are listening to American Family Radio Network. Focal Point is the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio, and I am your congenial, convivial, and amiable, as always, host and the loyal, humble, and cheerful first mate aboard the USS Focal Point. Welcome to the listening audience today. Got a lot for you to deliver, stacked, packed, and locked and loaded. We're going to talk about the opening, dedication of the embassy in Jerusalem. Talk a little bit about God's plan for Israel and why this is such an appropriate thing for our government to do. We will do that as the program develops. Now, before we jump into all of this, we want to turn our attention to the Word of God. We're using a schedule that you can find at pray.afa.net. And we are in the Gospel of John right now, in John chapter 11. One of the things I've told you I like about the schedule that we follow is it changes the diet every 2 to 3 weeks. So we are now in one of the richest books of the Bible, the Gospel of John, and now we're in John chapter 11, which, as you are aware, tells the story of the death and resurrection of Lazarus. Some very, very significant lessons we can learn from this little chapter, so let's just jump in and pick up some highlights. Now, verse 1, we're told that there was a certain man named Lazarus of Bethany who was ill. He was sick. This is the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This is about 2 miles from Jerusalem, just over the summit of the Mount of Olives. This is often where Jesus would go when he was there for Passover week. He would stay in their home virtually every night. So this is Lazarus, the one who lived there, and he was the one that was sick. Mary, who anointed it was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. That's recorded in John chapter 12, the next chapter in John's Gospel. She came in, she broke a very expensive a jar of perfume. She poured it over the feet of the Lord, and she wiped the Lord's feet with her hair as a sign of worship and adoration. It was that Mary who lives here in this home. Also the one, remember, that was sitting at the feet of Jesus when Martha, her older sister, got all bent out of shape because she wasn't helping. That's in Luke chapter 10. Now, at any rate, the sister sent to Christ. He was in Galilee at the time, and they said, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." So Jesus had a special relationship with Lazarus. He was among the circle of his very best friends. He's the one whom you love. Remember, John reserved that term elsewhere for himself. He was the disciple whom Jesus loved, Now, the sisters refer to Lazarus as the one whom you love. So this was a special friend of Christ in his incarnation. But, verse 4, when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." So he said, look, he's not going to be sick to death. This illness is not going to result in death. This whole thing is designed for the glory of God, for the splendor, the magnificence, the radiance of God to be released and to be revealed, and so that the Son of God may be glorified, that the radiance that properly belongs to the Son of God will be seen. His glory will be resplendent in this event. Now we're told in verse 5 that Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So, listen to this, so when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Now this, you say, is certainly odd, because we're told that Jesus loved Mary and Martha, loved Lazarus. We see this later when he stands at the grave of Lazarus and weeps tears over the death of his good friend. But when he hears that he's very ill, rather than rushing to Lazarus' side, he stays right where he was for 2 more days. And what this did, by the way, by the time, and this made sure that they got there on the 4th day after Lazarus had died. And the reason that is significant, in Jewish theology, their understanding was that the spirit of a man, it hung around his body in the grave for 3 days. But on the 4th day, the spirit that belonged to the man left to go to the afterlife, and his body, because it was no longer protected, surrounded by the spirit, would begin to decompose, begin to decay. So the problem was, if he's in the grave for 4 days, there's going to be an odor about him. He's going to start to smell. We'll see that in the section that we look at tomorrow. But here's my point, is Jesus loves Lazarus, loves Mary, loves Martha, but when he hears that Lazarus is gravely ill, he doesn't rush to his side. He stays right where he was. He delays the release of his power on behalf of Lazarus and those that were in his family. Now, the point here, we know clearly how much Jesus loved these three. So sometimes we understand from this passage that sometimes God delays to intervene, not because he does not love us, but because he does. His delay is not in spite of his love, it is because of his love. So his delays are because he has a greater glorious purpose that can only be accomplished through his delay. So that's one of the things that teaches us never to question God's timing. It may be too late on our calendar, but it is right on time on his calendar. So if God is delaying, it's only because he has some glorious purpose for that delay that we will see in due time. Well, let's go to prayer and pray some of this back to God. Lord Jesus, we are struck when we read that you heard that Lazarus, the one whom you loved, was sick, and you stayed where you were instead of rushing to his side. You had purposes for your delay, purposes that were to result in God's glory and in the glorification of you as his Son. I pray for me and for my family. I pray for the listening audience of Focal Point, for their families. Pray for every man, woman, and child in this land, all of our elected officials, including our president, President Trump. I pray that we will choose, all of us, to be patient in our times of need and choose to believe that if you delay, it is only because you have greater purposes than we can see. I pray that we will believe what the Word says, that Lazarus was indeed dead, and that your miracle of raising him to life bears powerful witness to your claim to be the Son of God. You are the Christ. the Son of God, who came into the world from your Father. I pray that we will all acknowledge you and worship you as the resurrection and the life. I claim your promise for us that because we believe in you, we will live even though we die. May we live and believe in you and find security in your promise that we will never die. In your name, amen.
Okay, so the big question for any decision you're going to make, is this actually going to work? Well, if you've heard about MediShare, which is a brilliant way of sharing healthcare costs, you may have wondered that. Does it work? Well, so did Dr. Stuart Hoover, who initially joined to save a lot of money. The typical family saves about $500 a month. Stuart saved even more.
When we first joined MediShare, we were immediately going from a little over $1,600 a month down to $460 basically a month.
So that's wonderful, but then his wife needed emergency surgery and the bills added up to $160,000.
So we were seeing the bills coming in, and then the bills were being paid. Portions were being shared, and the end result of this is this bill was taken care of.
Yes, MediShare works, and it's so easy to get your questions answered too, so why not? You can call right now, 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. While announcing the U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA, commonly known as the Iran deal, President Trump correctly explained the Iranian regime is the leading state sponsor of terror. It exports dangerous missiles, fuels conflicts across the Middle East, and supports terrorist proxies and militias such as Hezbollah, Hamas, the Taliban, and Al-Qaeda. Iran's military budget exploded by almost 40%, and the mullahs used the new money to build its nuclear-capable missiles. Thankfully, President Trump has withdrawn the U.S. from the deal.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, welcome back to Focal Point. Brian Fisher is my name. Good to have you in the conversation. Very special day today in the history of Israel and the United States. Today is the 70th anniversary of the founding of the nation of Israel. This, in effect, is their 4th of July. Now, they use a lunar calendar, so they celebrate it on a different day. But on our calendar, this is 70 years to the day from the day on which Israel was granted its status as a nation by UN decree. Now, you'll hear a lot of people complaining about Israel, that they stole the land and all that stuff, the same kind of things they say about us in relationship to the Native American tribes, that we stole their land, that we slaughtered and massacred and raped and pillaged and so forth, and the land is not rightfully ours. They say the same thing about the nation of Israel and the Palestinians. Now, when Donald Trump said Jerusalem is going to be the capital of Israel, he was simply acknowledging something that has been a historical reality for 3,000 years. Jerusalem was the capital of Israel when David was king. He was king from 1010 BC to 970 BC. What is that? That's 3,000+ years ago. And Jerusalem has been the center of the Israelites' political life and their cultural life from day one, from the time that they took over the land and David became the king. He made it his capital, and God chose the capital. Remember, God chose Jerusalem as the place to build the temple, the place where his name would dwell. So, to put it bluntly, God is the one who picked Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel. Jeff, I want to bring you into the conversation here just a little bit. We were talking earlier this morning about this this argument that Israel doesn't have a proper title to the land. The Palestinians make this argument all the time. But, you know, there's 3 ways that land can transfer morally or ethically from one sovereign power to another. and that's either by conquest or by settlement. You settle the land, nobody's lived there, and you settle it, or by purchase. And as we were talking about it, realize, Israel has proper title to this land no matter which one of those criterion that you used. And you were talking a little bit about what you know about the history of the land that Israel now occupies and how it got into their hands.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting if you really look into it, because even though the land was officially Israel's by the UN mandate or declaration, whatever you call it, a lot of the landowners were Muslim in that area, and they didn't just kick them off. Basically, what happened is there were a lot of rich, powerful Muslim men in that area that made a decree that a fatwa that you are not allowed to sell any land to the Jewish people, and if you caught, there'd be severe punishments. Well, the land was really not worth much, but by them not being able to sell it to the Jewish people, the rich, powerful Muslims in that area bought up the land for very, very cheap. And what they did on the sly was turned around and sold it to the Israelis or the Jewish people for even more than what it was worth. So they basically plundered their own people with a fatwa and money, but sold it to Jewish people.
And so buy something, it's yours.
Yeah.
You have legal title to it.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to keep that in mind in everything that you're going to hear. The Palestinians have no historical claim on Jerusalem or on the land. In fact, Palestinians, ladies and gentlemen, did not even exist until the time of the Roman Empire, because the Romans came up with the title Philistia for the land of Israel, or Palestine in our language, because they were so upset with the Jews, they didn't want to call it Judea, because Judea, which was the historic title for the land of Israel, reminded everybody of the Jewish people. And they'd had it with the Jewish people. Remember, they had to lay siege to Jerusalem in 68 AD. They surrounded the city of Jerusalem for 2 years, laying siege to it, could not get the Jewish people to surrender, which irritated them no end. They got to sleep outside the city of Jerusalem, outside the walls of the city, in tents on the ground. So by the time they got into the city of Jerusalem, they were so enraged that they just destroyed everything. They razed the temple to the ground. They lit everything on fire. And they pried the stones apart in order to get the gold out from between the stones. And that's why Jesus' prophecy was literally fulfilled, that not one stone would be left standing upon another. So when the Romans conquered the Jews and they drove them out of the city of Jerusalem, they renamed the place basically Philistia, because the territory of Philistia was nearby, and substituted that for the name of Judea. And that's how the people that stuck around became known as the Palestinians. But the Jews had been there for 1,000 years by the time that had happened, almost 1,100 years. So the land properly belongs to the people of Israel. Now we got a couple of clips from the ceremony this morning where the embassy, the American embassy, has been moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem through the leadership and the courage of Donald Trump. This is President Trump doing this. We got a little montage here of prior presidents. You're going to hear, first of all, from Bill Clinton. Then you will hear from George W. Bush. Then you will hear from Barack Obama, all of them pledging to do something about recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and moving the embassy there. It's a law, Congress, 1995, passed under Bill Clinton. It's a law that the embassy was to be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That law has been on the books since 1975. This is a law that every president, starting with Bill Clinton, flouted. They found a way to get around this law. They just gave themselves a waiver. Well, you can't do that. If Congress passes a law, you got a responsibility to obey it. They didn't do it. They gave themselves a waiver So they didn't have to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem because they knew it would be controversial. So it took a president of immense courage and boldness and leadership to do that. Donald Trump said, look, this is what we're going to do. I recognize, remember, he has said this before, and that he recognized Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the people of Israel. And he declared that this last fall. No president had ever done that. Officially declared that it's United States policy that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, nor had any president followed through on the promise to relocate the embassy to Jerusalem until Donald Trump came along and he said, look, we are just going to do it. Now, this is clip R2. Here is that montage of all these presidents promising to do something about Jerusalem.
Jerusalem is still the capital of Israel and must remain an undivided city accessible to all.
As soon as I take office, I will begin the process of moving the United States ambassador to the city Israel as chosen as its capital.
I continue to say that Jerusalem will be the capital of Israel, and I have said that before, and I will say it again.
And Jerusalem will remain the capital of Israel, and it must remain undivided.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
Now, here's a good question there. You heard 4 presidents making promises with regard to what they were going to do with the city of Jerusalem. You heard Bill Clinton make a promise. You heard George W. Bush make a promise. You heard Barack Obama make a promise. And you heard Donald Trump make a promise. Which of those 4 presidents kept his word, kept his promise? Donald Trump. So here's another promise that's been fulfilled. You know, Donald Trump is proving to be a promise keeper. The promises that he made on the campaign trail have proved not to be empty promises, not promises that he made just to get votes, but promises that he's carried through on, that he's followed through on, and the embassy is now today located in the city of Jerusalem. And you know, you had Donald Trump's name flashed on the ancient walls of Jerusalem today by the Jewish people to thank him for what he's doing. The American flag projected on the wall as well. What the message projected onto the ancient walls of Jerusalem today said, "Thank you, President Trump." And there were American and Israeli flags side by side. So the Israeli people, of course, are celebrating this. It's a huge day for Israel because of not only the 70th anniversary of their July 4, their Day of Independence, but also the recognition by the mightiest power on earth. That's huge for Israel's status among the nations of the world. You know who else approved Donald Trump moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem? You ready for this? Chuck Schumer. So you got Mitt Romney out there criticizing everything that Donald Trump is doing with regard to this embassy, accusing him of picking a bigot pastor in Robert Jeffress to deliver the invocation. But Chuck Schumer's out there applauding Donald Trump. He said this, "In a long overdue move, we have moved our embassy to Jerusalem. Every nation should have the right to choose its capital," Schumer said in a statement. "I applaud President Trump for doing it." Now, we'll come back with this after the break, but I want to review with you a little bit of Mitt Romney's attack on Robert Jeffress. We'll talk about that when we come back. Here's a story from the Daily Mail. The headline, "Israeli snipers kill scores of Palestinians and wound 1,300 as 35 protesters rally against the U.S. Embassy opening in Jerusalem." And I read all the way through this, Daily Mail, one of the major papers in London, and you know what is completely missing from this story? And Jeff, another thing we were talking about is that these are not nonviolent protests that are taking place.
No, they're burning tires like crazy. They sent kites with Molotov cocktails and igniters on them to start fires in the Israeli fields, to burn Israeli crops. I'm just watching video while you were talking about them storming the fence and trying to breach it.
So it is a violent protest. We'll come back and finish this up, but you get the impression reading the Daily Mail that all these Palestinians are out having a picnic on the hillside, and the snipers started picking them off.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Everything Captive. Today, May 14th, is modern Israel's birthday. Jews from all across the world have been returning to the biblical homeland for some 100 years previously. The steady streams of Jewish migrants back to the biblical land of Israel became a flood tide after the horrors of the Nazi Holocaust that killed 6 billion Jews during World War II. The United Nations voted to create a Jewish state, and she came into being on May the 14th, 1948. Israel was immediately attacked by all of her neighbors, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. And yet, with incredible bravery, and I believe with divine intervention, they prevailed and preserved their continued existence and freedom. President Harry Truman, against the advice of the State Department and his entire cabinet, immediately had the United States recognize the new Israeli state, which did much to help them borrow money to allow them to buy the weapons they needed to successfully defend themselves from being annihilated. America has long supported the modern state of Israel as the only stable democracy in the Middle East. For Christians, however, there are more biblical reasons to support Israel. The Bible tells us in Genesis 12 that God established an everlasting covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, with his chosen people, the Jews, and that he gave them the promised land of Canaan forever. In the 20th century, we have witnessed the fulfillment of this ancient prophecy. God promised he would bring his people back into the land, and they have come. There are now more Jews in Israel than anywhere else in the world. The Abrahamic covenant also says God will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curseth thee. I support Israel because God commanded us to do so. I also want God to bless America, and if we bless the Jews, God will bless us. If we don't, he won't. Happy birthday, Israel. God bless you, and God bless America. For more information about SES, go to ses.edu. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net. afa.net.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. You are listening to ethanol-free radio, high-octane radio on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Program is Focal Point. Wanted to get back to the irresponsible journalism involved from the Daily Mail, one of the major newspapers in the UK. And I read all the way through this. I'm not going to bother to count up the number of paragraphs that are in this story, but it fills up all of 2 pages, 20 paragraphs or so. And not once, there's not one single solitary mention of the violent nature of the Palestinian protests. Not one. They're throwing bricks. They're throwing rocks. They are sending kites with Molotov cocktails on them. Jeff was just showing me some footage taken just right there at the fence that marks the border. And these Palestinians are throwing flaming somethings or other, flaming Molotov cocktails or whatever across the fence. These are not peaceful demonstrations. They are violent demonstrations. And the Israelis have warned the Palestinians, look, if you don't want to get shot, stay away from the border. It's our border. We are serious about protecting it and enforcing it. And if you try to storm the border, and Jeff was showing me a picture of hordes of them. You want to talk about that? Hordes of them trying to storm the border fence.
Here's the interesting part, too, is the Israelis are pretty smart. They set their fence inside the Israeli border, back from the border with Gaza or whatever neighboring country is. So if you actually reach the fence, you're on Israeli land.
You're way inside Israeli territory. Yeah. So you're a trespasser, you're an illegal immigrant. And the Jews just are not messing around. They have snipers there that are picking off the Palestinians that are part of this violent unrest. I think the total I've seen now is up to 52. that have been shot by these snipers. And again, the impression is just totally false that's given by the Daily Mail and the Associated Press. And you might make a note of this as you're looking at stories about this unrest at the border. Read through one of those stories from the Associated Press or NBC News or ABC. I'm not saying they're all going to do this because I don't know. I haven't read them all. But see if there's any mention in there anywhere of the violence from the Palestinians. See how far into the story you have to read before you find it. And again, see if that article creates the impression that these are peaceful Palestinians. They're just there on the grassy slope outside the border with Israel, just having a picnic with their families, and all of a sudden these Jewish snipers start shooting them. That's not what's going on here.
Yeah, there's one other thing I want to bring up. You talk about our lack of news, and if you want to mention fake news, the Palestinians are experts at fake news. I saw another video where a mob was creating trouble right there by the fence. One shot rang out, and 6 men dropped to the ground all at the same time, which is pretty amazing from one single shot. Yeah. And they were all whisked away on stretchers, and emergency TV cameras were all there and everything.
6 at one blow.
Yeah.
So you wonder about this. Let me just read a couple of paragraphs from this Daily Mail story. And again, we don't know, but every one of these is designed to arouse this sympathy. A protester screams in agony as he is picked up by fellow Palestinians during deadly clashes along the Gaza border today. Now, maybe he was shot. Maybe he's one of these guys that Jeff Reed was talking about, one of the 6 guys that just fell to the ground when they heard the shot, and they're picking him up, and he's rolling around on the cot screaming in agony, and it's all make-believe. Here's another one. Palestinian protesters carry an injured man who was shot by Israeli troops during a protest. Again, during a protest. The implication being it was a nonviolent protest. They were carrying signs, and they were just exercising freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, and all of a sudden they just started getting sniped at. So again, we don't know if this guy was truly injured or was just simply faking it. Here's another paragraph. An elderly Palestinian man falls to the ground amid reports he had been shot. Amid reports. Notice that. It's like the Daily Mail doesn't even believe this guy was actually shot. He falls to the ground amid reports he had been shot. Daily Mail won't even report this as a fact, even though their sympathies clearly are entirely with the Palestinians. And then one more. Protesters use a horse and cart as they carried wounded Palestinians away from the conflict. Yeah. These poor Palestinians. Yeah. Israelis have these fancy ambulances with red lights and all the emergency equipment. These poor picked-on Palestinians have to use a horse and buggy to get their wounded away from the site of the protest. That's what you call fake news. Now let's play a couple of quick sound bites from the opening ceremony today of the American Embassy in Israel. I want to begin, first of all, with remarks from Donald Trump. This is clip number 1, and we don't have the whole thing, but here's an excerpt of Donald Trump. His remarks were televised. He didn't go in person, which I think was wise. I think whoever had rockets in the Middle East would have been training him right on that site this day if Donald Trump were there. But here's what he had to say in his televised remarks this morning.
The United States remains fully committed to facilitating a lasting peace agreement, and we continue to support the status quo at Jerusalem's holy sites, including at the Temple Mount, also known as Haram al-Sharif. This city and its entire nation is a testament to the unbreakable spirit of the Jewish people. The United States will always be a great friend of Israel and a partner in the cause of freedom and peace. We wish Ambassador Friedman good luck as he takes up his office in this beautiful Jerusalem embassy, and we extend a hand in friendship to Israel, the Palestinians, and to all of their neighbors. May there be peace. May God bless this embassy. May God bless all who serve there. And may God bless the United States of America.
All right, so that's President Trump in his remarks about the opening of this embassy. I notice again, constantly declaring that our aim, our goal here is peace. Now, Mitt Romney, we're going to play an excerpt from Robert Jeffress's prayer here in just a moment. Mitt Romney has gone jihadi on Robert Jeffress. Here's a story from the Times of Israel. Romney slams Trump's choice of bigot pastor for Jerusalem embassy prayer. Senate candidate Mitt Romney of Utah said Sunday a prominent Baptist minister shouldn't be giving the prayer that opens the U.S. embassy in Jerusalem because he's a, quote, religious bigot, end quote. Now, personally, I think that Mitt Romney is still smarting over what Robert Jeffress said back in 2011 at the Values Voters Summit. He said it on my program in an interview with me that just kind of lit up everything, where he said he believed that Mormonism to be a cult, which according to Christian orthodoxy and Christian theology is. I mean, I understand that our Mormon friends have a different view of it, and I respect them, and I understand their view of it, and they're certainly entitled to that in America. But according to the Bible, according to Christian orthodoxy, that's how we would identify and label the religion of Mormonism. I think that stung Mitt Romney, and he's never forgotten it. I believe Mitt Romney has one of the thinnest skins in politics. So I think he's been carrying this grudge since 2011. He's now calling Robert Jeffress a religious bigot who should not have been allowed to give this prayer at the opening of the embassy. And Robert Jeffress responded by saying, salvation is through faith in Christ alone. He said this, historic Christianity has taught for 2,000 years that salvation is through faith in Christ alone. The fact that I, along with tens of millions of evangelical Christians around the world, continue to espouse that belief is neither bigoted nor is it newsworthy. So Robert Jeffress just keeping the main thing. Christianity is about salvation. Christianity is clear. Jesus Christ himself made it very clear that he was the way, the truth, and the life, that no one comes to the Father except through him. Now, Robert Jeffress, according to Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper, has said that Islam is, quote, a religion that promotes pedophilia, and it does. That's accurate. We've told you about the dancing boys in Afghanistan. These were young boys that serve at the pleasure of Afghani soldiers. So it's a religion that does, in fact, promote pedophilia. Muhammad entered into intimacy with his young wife, Aisha, married her when she was 6, began having sexual intimacy with her when she was aged 9. Well, so Muhammad slept with a 9-year-old girl. This is a religion that promotes pedophilia. There's no exaggeration in that. That's not even derogatory. That is just a statement of plain fact. And he called it a heresy from the pit of hell. And if you look at what Islam has done since it was founded in the 7th century BC, everywhere it goes, it has left behind a trail of war, violence, and death. Well, let's pick up about a minute of Robert Jeffress's prayer this morning at the dedication of the American Embassy in Jerusalem.
Heavenly Father, we come before you, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, thanking you for bringing us to this momentous occasion in the life of your people and in the history of our world. And Father, we are also grateful as we think about what happened 70 years ago today, at this very moment, when you fulfilled the prophecies of the prophets and regathered your people in this promised land. And I believe, Father, I speak for every one of us when we say We thank you every day that you have given us a president who boldly stands on the right side of history, but more importantly, stands on the right side of you, oh God, when it comes to Israel. And now today, Father, we want to pray what the psalmist prayed 3,000 years ago. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Evangelical praying at the opening, the dedication of the American Embassy in Jerusalem. Back with your calls.
Who is God? What is He like? How can we know? Your answer to these questions will impact your worship, discipleship, apologetics, and evangelism. Learn from Ravi Zacharias, Josh McDowell, Chip Ingram, and more than 60 other speakers at Southern Evangelical Seminary's 25th Annual National Conference on Christian Apologetics. It's October 12th and 13th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Get the early bird discount when you register by August 1st at ses.edu.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
Since the day the American Family Association began asking you to sign a petition urging the cancellation of 13 Reasons Why, Netflix has made some changes. They've added disclaimers before episodes and even a link to a suicide prevention hotline number. This is progress, but it's not enough. If you have signed the petition, thank you. If you haven't, please do. Netflix continues to ignore our request for a meeting to discuss the dangers of their show. And they're still going forward with the release of Season 2 of this dangerous program. Too many teens have taken their own lives after watching 13 Reasons Why, a program which seems to suggest suicide as a viable option. Your signature and prayers could help convince Netflix to reconsider their social responsibility. Even one more teen suicide would be infinitely too many. Please read and sign the Netflix petition at afa.net.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. We'll take your calls in this segment. The number to call is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840 is the number to call if you'd like to weigh in on our conversation about Robert Jeffress, about Mitt Romney going after him. And again, I'm not bringing that up to pick on Mormons or anything of the sort. I have honest theological disagreements with those who are followers of Mormonism. I've talked with my disagreements about, had many Mormon friends back in Boise, frequently talked with them about the differences. We compared notes about what our religions teach. So I have enormous affection for a lot of my Mormon friends. I worked with a lot of Mormon legislators in the Idaho state legislature, worked on legislation with them. We shared common cause and common concern on a lot of good, solid, pro-family legislation. They were one of the biggest helps that we had in supporting our amendment to the Idaho Constitution to define marriage as one man and one woman. So I have nothing but affection and respect for my Mormon friends who helped us when it came to issues of value. So I don't mean to be picking on followers of the LDS faith. I'm not doing that. I'm simply saying there are some honest differences of opinion. And if you take Christianity seriously, you take the Bible seriously, then you will come to the conclusions that Robert Jeffress is talking about here. So that's all I'm trying to say there in behalf of my good friend. Now, the number to call is 888-589-8840. That is the number to call to join the program, and we would be glad to have you weigh in on any of the topics we've talked about so far today. Let's go to Jamie in North Carolina. Jamie, North Carolina, welcome. What's on your mind?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for welcoming me. I would like to make a bold statement that I think that our American legislator ought to certainly and most indubitably take a a point to what Israel is doing with their wall and their border. I think we should protect our land and our border just like they do and pick them off one by one. And by the way, I think we ought to plant the rainbow flag right on top on all four corners of the winds and say, come and get it.
All right, Jamie. Well, and I'm not saying I agree with what Jamie's suggesting here. A lot of you probably thought the same thing. But what Israel's situation shows certainly is that there are nations that recognize that borders have to be protected. They have to be protected with lethal force if necessary. We have been overrun by an invasion. This is not immigration. If they come in here without permission and they're coming in bunches, that's not immigration. That's an invasion. Immigration is when you get permission, you're invited to come in, and that's when you come in. And you come in order to assimilate and become an American. You come to this land to share our heroes, to share our values, to share our history, to share our holidays. That's what immigration is all about. An invasion is not that. And especially we have Border Patrol agents that have been wounded. They've been shot at. They have had rocks thrown at them, which can be lethal if they hit. We've had Border Patrol agents that have been killed on the border. Lethal force is being used against them. And so far, I think we have shown remarkable and perhaps unnecessary restraint in not using lethal force to protect our border and to protect our Border Patrol agents. All right, Jamie, I appreciate the call. Let's grab a call from Jason in Hamilton, Mississippi. Jason, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, great show. It's a great day. And, my comment is that throughout the Bible, in my ministry, I asked for God to do great things. And please let me be a part of it, but do great things, and sometimes even beyond me, so that everybody will know that God is the one that's doing this. And I've seen that happen. And I think about Donald Trump. Never would I have voted for him if I would have had 100 choices. He would not have been number one. He gets elected. He's probably the most pro-religious, friendly president ever. And then these things are happening that he is doing that I think it's God's hand at work. And when God says it's my time to do, God does, and he sometimes uses the most straight-up religious man to do it, and sometimes he doesn't. And we all know Trump and his problems, but God is doing what God needs to be done, and he's using somebody that will listen and somebody that will be available.
Yeah. All right, well, listen, I appreciate the call, Jason. Really, you think about it. There just is no natural explanation for Donald Trump being the president of the United States of America. I think you have to invoke God to explain that. There's no possible way to explain a man like Donald Trump becoming the president of the United States of America unless God wanted it to happen. Now we believe that about every president. We believe that God raised up Barack Obama for his purposes, and we said that during the time. What those purposes were, we may not know. We may not find out completely till we get to the other side. But it's clear that God has raised up Donald Trump. He may be a Cyrus type. That analogy has been used a lot. Cyrus was not a believer, but he was the man that God raised up, king of Persia, to return the nation of Israel to its homeland and blessed them, gave them resources to rebuild their land. All right, let's go to Maggie in Salt Lake City. Welcome, Maggie. What's on your mind?
Hi. You got a good old Mormon from Salt Lake City here.
Yes,
wondering why you keep calling us a cult. We're not a cult.
Yeah. Well, now why? Let me ask you this, Maggie.
Why
would you say that you? And again, I want to be sure. I don't want to be adversarial with you. As I mentioned, I have a lot of good friends back in Boise area that are Mormons in good standing. But why would you say that Mormonism is not a cult from a Christian perspective?
Well, first of all, it's not called Mormonism. It's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So we believe in Jesus Christ. We're as Christian as any evangelical, Catholic, any church out there. Christ is the head of our church. So I'm trying to figure out why we keep getting labeled as a cult.
Well, let me ask you just a couple of questions, Maggie, about your faith, about your understanding of Jesus. How would you describe the nature of Jesus? Who was he?
Jesus is the Son of God.
Now, how did he become the Son of God? I guess that would be my follow-up question. How did he become the Son of God?
He was born of Mary here on earth. We're all sons and daughters of God, but Jesus was chosen to do his role on earth, to come down and teach us.
Now, did he become God because he was obedient to the will of the Father and therefore became elevated to godhood because of the righteous nature of his life?
Well, he is a God himself because of his obedience and his righteous nature and the things he does.
So do you believe that that's how he became God? He became God through his righteous life and his obedience and faith in God.
I think so.
Okay.
There may have been more involved. You know, I'm not in charge of calling that. That's God's decision.
Now, one other question I've got, Maggie, I've taken some tours of LDS temples before they were sanctified so that Gentiles such as myself were able to go through them, and I was struck by the fact that in room after room after room, I saw portraits of Jesus. I saw portraits of Jesus ministering to children, portraits of Jesus feeding the 5,000 and so forth, but I never saw a portrait of Jesus hanging on the cross. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, probably because we don't celebrate his death. We celebrate his life and the things he did and his resurrection. We celebrate all that, but we don't celebrate the death. We certainly believe in that. We certainly believe in the cross and what happened.
Okay. Now, and again, what do you think? You believe that Christ died on the cross. What do you believe was accomplished when he died on the cross, or was anything accomplished, or did he simply die a death that we ought to praise because he was willing to stand firm for his faith and not bend despite the pressure?
We believe that he took all of the sins of all of us so that we can return to him when we repent of our sins.
Okay. And by return, you're referring to the fact that in the understanding that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have, that we all existed as pre-existent spirits, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then we are one day going to return to him. All right, Meg, listen, I appreciate the call. I've only got about a minute, so I kind of want to respond to what you said. Now, let me give you my definition of a cult. A cult is a variation of Christianity that has a view of Christ that is radically different than the view that the Bible itself has of Christ. That, to me, is the bright line. And in the Bible's view of Christ, he was not a man who became God. He was the God who became man. He was a God from eternity past. He never came into being at a point in time. The Bible says that he has always been God. There was never a time that he was not God. He didn't have to become elevated to godhood or graduate to godhood because he always was God. So he was God in human form when he was conceived in the womb of Mary. So that's the difference, I think. You believe that Jesus came into being at a point in time. His spirit didn't, because you believe he was pre-existent like all of us are. But in his earthly incarnation, he came into being at a point in time, whereas the Bible teaches, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word, that is Jesus, was God. All the way back to Genesis 1:1, Jesus Christ already was God. He was God from eternity past. And that's where I part company with my good friends in the LDS Church. Thank you, Maggie. I very much appreciate the conversation with you. Thank you.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Secular progressives in the United States have worked to alter the very nature of our republic.
For the progressives, there are no longer any God-given natural rights.
AFA Executive Vice President Ed Vitagliano helps you understand the progressive threat to the American Republic. Get your copy of this powerful DVD from the AFA Cultural Institute at afastore.net.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. It is the biggest story at home and abroad, especially in Israel, where the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem opened today. Speaking on AFR's Today's Issues program, radio host Dr. Michael Brown said this was the right thing to do, and it was the righteous thing to do.
It's a right thing to do in that Jerusalem is Israel's functioning capital. It's very simple. That's where all the principal buildings are and government organizations that have to do with capital, just like Washington, D.C. Jerusalem is Israel's functioning capital. That's one. Number two, all the way back in the days of Bill Clinton, it was already determined that we would move the embassy to Jerusalem. And every president since has delayed it. President Trump, to his credit, has acted on his promise to move it. Number three, we know from prophetic scriptures that Jesus will come back to a Jewish Jerusalem. So we also know that there'll be a world opposition to a Jewish Jerusalem. So whether this is leading directly up to that or not, it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Brown went on to say that pragmatically, it's important for the Muslim world to know that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Mixed reactions today following a U.S. Supreme Court ruling on sports betting. The Supreme Court says states can legalize sports betting as the federal prohibition on state laws authorizing sports betting violates the anti-commandeering rule. The case involved New Jersey's attempt to legalize sports betting under former Governor Chris Christie. For over half a century, most states have had laws on the books barring sports betting, but some states have started to view it as a potential to create jobs and generate revenue by opening up casinos and allowing sports betting to be legal. Attorney Jonathan Wood of Pacific Legal Foundation says this is a major win for federalism, regardless of where one falls on sports betting, but Les Bernal of Stop Predatory Gambling sees things differently.
We believe that all men and women in our nation deserve a fair opportunity to build the best life possible for themselves and their families. This litigation was conceived in greed by powerful gambling interests in partnership with a handful of self-serving politicians that benefit a privileged few. It's a naked money grab from the wallets of ordinary Americans, cloaked as a states' rights case.
Another front has opened up in the battle over parental rights and school sex ed programs. The latest dispute involves a California health law that says parents may not opt their children out of some types of classes. AFN's Bob Kellogg reports.
It's called the California Healthy Youth Act of 2015. Parents can opt their children out of classes dealing with sexual organs and their function, but Brad Dacus of the Pacific Justice Institute says they cannot pull their children out of other sex-oriented classes.
According to the Orange County Public School District's attorney, parents can opt their children out of sex education, but they can't opt their children out of instruction that is dealing with healthy attitudes, quote unquote, involving gender identity, sexual orientation, and the like.
What's worse, he says students can be propagandized with the leftist sex ed agenda without parental notification.
What is being required to be taught to these children throughout the state of California is indoctrination, egregious, potentially very harmful and inaccurate indoctrination that could impact millions of children without the average parent even being aware of it.
The law also calls for the discussion of abortion, undoubtedly with a liberal point of view, according to the activistmommy.com website. I'm Bob Kellogg.
In other news this hour, Margot Kidder, who starred as Lois Lane in the Superman films of the 1970s and 80s, has died. Sears Holding Corporation is considering selling its storied Kenmore brand along with other related assets, and a book nearly 5 decades overdue has been returned to the San Francisco Public Library. The late fee would have been more than $1,700 had it not been capped at some point at $10. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Now that will be new, won't it? We look around us today at the old heaven and the old earth. There's not a whole lot of righteousness in this one, is there? But the Bible says that the earth will be filled with righteousness when it is recreated by our God.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Heavenly Father, we come before you, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, thanking you for bringing us to this momentous occasion in the life of your people and in the history of our world.
This city and its entire nation is a testament to the unbreakable spirit of the Jewish people.
70 years ago today, at this very moment, you fulfilled the prophecies of the prophets when regathered your people in this promised land.
The United States will always be a great friend of Israel and a partner in the cause of freedom and peace. May there be peace. May God bless this embassy. May God bless all who serve there. And may God bless the United States of America.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, welcome to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Glad to have you. If you were live streaming us on Facebook, live streaming us on YouTube, audio streaming us at afr.net, catching us on the go by using the apps for the iPhone and for the Android, catching us on a podcast. However you happen to be in the conversation, we are glad you are here. Just a reminder, we record the program as we live stream it, upload it to the Facebook page with an extensive table of contents so you can find your way around. Also, don't forget, you can go to our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to it. You can click the little bell on the upper right-hand corner, get a notification every time a brand new live program, Focal Point, begins. So welcome to the second hour. A couple of quick notes before we get started. There's a story about a black bear in New Jersey, of all places. And this baker in New Jersey had baked 24 cupcakes. Chocolate cupcakes, vanilla cupcakes, strawberry cupcakes, and had the car parked on the street. And this black bear smelled the cupcakes in the car and actually broke the window to get into her car and ate every cotton-picking one of them there cupcakes, all of them gone. And the baker, she is an animal lover. She doesn't want her property destroyed, but she doesn't want the bear to be killed. So she's got a soft heart for the hungry black bear. And then from our world's dumbest criminals file, there's a fugitive from North Carolina on the run. He accidentally dialed 911 while he was in upstate New York, and the police went and found him, and he's now back behind bars.
Oops.
All right, let's go to the phones. Let's grab a call from Gail in Dyersburg, Tennessee. Gail, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, thank you for taking my call.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a comment, 2 scripture verses, and a question about the year or the number 70 with regard to the Jewish nation.
Hit me.
My comment is, I've seen the hand of God more in the last 18 months than I ever have in my life, and I'm 69 years old. Okay?
Yep.
The scripture verse is, read, "Remember me, O Lord, when you show favor to your people. Come to my aid when you save them, that I may enjoy the prosperity of your chosen ones, that I may share in the joy of your nation and join your inheritance in giving praise." Now, my question is concerning the 70 years. I know that comes from Old Testament and Daniel, but I'm talking about for the current time, the meaning of the of 70 within, Judaism.
Yeah. Well, I don't have anything insightful, Gail, to share about this. You're right that the term 70 years was very prominent in the Old Testament prophets, particularly like Jeremiah and others, who God revealed to them that they would be in captivity, Babylonian captivity, for 70 years, and then after 70 years of captivity, they would return. And so they counted the years, counted the days, and when they got to the end of that, they started praying to God, look, you said 70 years, we're not seeing it, we want to be released. And that's when you had this sudden dramatic change in the power structure of the entire world, where the Babylonians are dethroned and Cyrus is brought in to be the ruler of the world, and all of a sudden, boom, 2 years, they're back in the land. So the 70 years in Israel's history and in Jewish theology would have a significant value just because of that was the mark of their return from captivity. What it might symbolize today, I don't know. But let me put it to you this way, Gail. I don't believe there's any accident that the movement of our embassy to Jerusalem on the 70th anniversary of the birth of modern Israel, I cannot believe that that is an accident. I don't believe there's anything coincidental about that. I don't believe there's anything accidental about that. I think God knew this day was coming and that Donald Trump was going to be the instrument that he raised up to do this thing, to finally move the embassy of the United States of America to the capital of Israel, a president who would declare that Jerusalem, he used the word eternal. He said Jerusalem is always going to be the capital of Israel. So I don't think there's any accident about that. I don't have anything more dramatic than that to say, but obviously 70 was a profound term for the ancient Old Testament prophets, and I think some of that is behind the reason why God did this today. I mean, Israel knew how important 70-year periods were in their day, and here is a 70-year period that culminates with Jerusalem being identified as the capital of Israel by the most powerful nation on the face of the globe, and our embassy, the representation of our government, being moved to that city. All right, Gail, appreciate the call. Thank you. That's a great question. Verisa in Mississippi. Verisa, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hi, I am just so excited about today. Years ago, nice to speak to you. I'm so glad to be on your program today.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I am so excited about today. Years ago, I worked with this lady. She was my supervisor on my job. And she always told me to pray Psalms 122 and 6. And because she's a spiritual person, and I am too, so I trusted her. When I started doing that, oh my gosh, God just started revealing things to me. Long story short, we were having lunch one day, and she asked me, did my dog eat bones with her? Sure, Ruth eats bones. She said, Ruth? I said, yeah, R-U-T-H. And she says, oh, my goodness. She said, my dog name is Boaz. And it was just so exciting, Jew meeting Gentile, and how God has, nobody is no coincidence, like you said. This was already ordained. And for her to just tell me that, and I began to do, and God just started revealing stuff to me. And this is 2018, and I believe that God has got great things in store for us, not just today, but for us and His chosen people.
Okay, Verisa, listen, I appreciate that. Thank you very, very much. And one of the things I wanted to mention in the first hour, and I didn't do it, but let me take the occasion of Verisa's call to do that. I wanted to talk just for a moment about where Israel fits biblically. I don't have a lot of time in this segment, see how far I get. But I want to take you to the book of Romans and what Paul says at the end of Romans 9 through 11. That's where he's talking about God's plan for Israel. And he says, look, Israel is far from God. As he's writing this, he says in 62 AD, right now, Israel is far from God. But he says in verse 29 of chapter 11, he says the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. And he's talking about the gifts and calling that God has on the nation of Israel. He's given them gifts, and he has a calling on their life as a nation that is irrevocable, meaning that God is never going to change his mind. Israel has not been replaced by the church. You'll hear that from some students of Scripture. Israel still fits in God's plans for the future, and we as America, we want to be a part of that. Back in 2.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
U.S. Senator Lamar Alexander told his colleagues he's given up on stabilizing the Affordable Care Act. So now efforts to help Americans paying skyrocketing premiums will turn to the Trump administration and the states, he wrote. Well, exactly right. As we've seen outside of Congress, Obamacare can be creatively undermined. Trump is undoing Obamacare regulations. Idaho issued an executive order allowing policies that do not comply with Obamacare. And Iowa created a new type of coverage and declared it not insurance, so it doesn't have to comply with Obamacare. The federal government has no business in healthcare, and it's refreshing to see the states taking it back.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Are you personally offended by foul language on television? Even well-written, well-acted programming may be riddled with profanity and undesirable dialogue. The TV Guardian app is technology that mutes and replaces profanity, sexual references, and sacrilegious language from television programs and movies. You see, programmers are required to provide closed captioning. TV Guardian uses the closed caption to look ahead, find the offensive language, mute it, and replace the phrasing in the caption. Users of the TV Guardian app can set the filters for their family's needs, using strict, moderate, or tolerant settings, with or without filtering for religious or sexual references. The TV Guardian app is now providing profanity-free programming. Information is available at tvguardian.com/dish. tvguardian.com/dish.
American Family Radio is thankful for the support of TV Guardian.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hello and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. Jeff showed me on the break a couple of this will just crack you up. Remember, we told you about the fake news that's coming out of Israel about these protests from the Gazans, these Palestinians. And I'm not saying that there's nobody got killed. I'm not saying that at all. Please don't misunderstand me. But even the Daily Mail, remember, they talked about this older guy that was being carried off the field of battle, so to speak, amid reports that he had been shot. They didn't even think he'd been shot. Daily Mail didn't even think he'd been shot. Now, there's some actual video footage. I guess this is from last week, right, Jeff?
Yes.
This is before the crescendo today. But describe. Just laughed out loud when I saw it. Describe what you saw in these videos.
Well, there's one, they're definitely trying to create a false pretense to influence international moods. About 6 guys rushing a guy off in a stretcher.
They got the guy on a stretcher.
Yeah.
And they're running. I mean, they got an emergency here. This guy needs medical help, and he needs it right now.
Video guys closely following him, like trying to get the face of the guy and all that. They get far enough, and obviously they get tired. They set the stretcher down. He gets up and walks off, and it shows him later with a slingshot out there throwing rocks at the border.
Okay.
Another one with a little kid. A guy in an official vest and everything, looking like medical rescue personnel, cradling a little child, running with the photographer, videographer right there, following him all along. Gets done, sets the kid down, and the kid walks off.
Videographer says, okay, got what I need. So he sets the kid down. Little kid just kind of trots off. So that's just an example, and the Western press is so gullible, they fall for this transparent stuff. And then it makes it difficult to believe anything that they say about what the Palestinians are doing over there. Well, let's keep the focus on international events. Let's look at clip number 2, talking here about North Korea and what has happened in Trump's diplomacy with North Korea. We've got the North Korean peninsula. It seems to be heading in a direction of becoming nuclear-free, denuclearizing. You have the Korean War been going since 1950. What is that? That's 68 years. It looks like it's on the verge of ending. Instead of a truce, we may have peace. You've got the leader of North Korea and the leader of South Korea shaking hands over the line that separates their two countries. Just kind of phenomenal stuff. These 3 hostages that North Korea had held being released by Kim Jong-un, flown back to the States by Mike Pompeo. So just kind of pretty phenomenal stuff. And you wonder, is this phenomenal enough that even Democrats would be willing to give some praise to Trump? Remember, we just heard, or we talked about Chuck Schumer saying that he's giving credit to Donald Trump for moving the embassy to Jerusalem. This is a great thing, Chuck Schumer says, and I give Donald Trump credit for it. So that's one victory on the stage of international events. Now, what does Ben Cardin, this guy's a Democrat from Maryland, card-carrying member of the Democratic Party, and remember, the entire Democrat Party now is virtually entirely socialist. You know, Hillary Clinton said 71% of the Democrats are socialist. That's why I lost in 2016, because I'm such an ardent capitalist that all these socialists in my own party didn't want to vote for me. That's hooey, but that's what she was saying. She's the one that said 71% of my party are socialist. So here's what Ben Cardin said about Donald Trump bringing our hostages home.
It's a victory for the American people whenever we can get our people back home. And we wanted the diplomacy to work in regards to eliminating the nuclear threat of North Korea. So that's all very positive, and it's under Donald Trump. So yeah, absolutely, we give him credit.
Wow, these are Democrats saying that Donald Trump getting it done in North Korea, Donald Trump getting it done in Israel. Now, not all Democrats are that enthusiastic. Let's go to clip number 3. This is John Brennan. John Brennan, remember, is director of CIA under Barack Obama. This is a guy that is a Muslim convert, had a dramatic conversion to Islam while he was in Iran on post for the CIA. And he's talking here about North Korea. And he doesn't really have a lot of praise for Donald Trump in this soundbite. Thinks he's naive and gullible and just got taken to the cleaners by the North Koreans. Let's listen.
Kim Jong-un, who I despise because of the brutality that he has put upon the North Korean people. But unfortunately, I think he has been masterful in how he has manipulated perceptions and how he has manipulated and quite frankly, duped Mr. Trump. I hope that a summit meeting is going to result in a denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
What are the odds?
I think they're probably, less than 0.1%. I don't think he's going to do that. I think he is going to pause. He has worked over the last, 6 years, and then his father worked, to have this nuclear capability as a way to deter foreign military aggression led by the United States and South Korea. I don't see any scenario that he is going to give that up quickly, willingly. And so I think what he's trying to do is to, again, present an appearance of accommodation. He is going to put on pause a program that already has developed a nuclear stockpile. He has ballistic missile capability already. And so if he says he's not going to do anything more, I think it's going to buy him time. And what he's trying to do is to get sanctions relaxed so that he can help his economy while maintaining that nuclear capability.
All right, so this is Brennan. He thinks Trump's been taken to the cleaners, despite the fact that these hostages got released and Mike Pompeo brought them home. Now, here's the other thing that's telling, and John Brennan doesn't even realize the hole that he stepped in here. Remember, they're talking about peace and all that kind of stuff, and he's admitting here that Kim Jong-un had nuclear capability. So they're admitting that he has developed a nuclear stockpile. He wanted to help his economy while maintaining that nuclear capability. So here's Brennan admitting that we've got a nuclearized enemy on our hands, and the only one that's been able to dent the protective layer around Kim Jong-un and North Korea has been Donald Trump. Now let's go to David Brooks, clip number 4. He is the so-called conservative columnist for the New York Times, and this is kind of a backhanded compliment, but he says, you know, Donald Trump is used to dealing with thugs. He's dealt with thugs his whole life, and maybe that's come in handy. Let's listen.
You know, one of the things you notice with the president is that he comes from a background where basically in the real estate business he worked with a lot of thugs, and he cultivated a lot of thugs, and he was a little thuggish himself. But in my view, that helps him, for all his drawbacks, understand thugs. And so in North Korea, he understood that being tough with a thug produces some results, and we're in a better situation with North Korea than we were otherwise. He's been much tougher on the Chinese in trade, and a lot of people think he's adopted the right policy, because sometimes you got to just stand up to people. And in Iran, I have very mixed views about whether Trump did the right thing. But the President Obama, the argument he made for it, which was that Iran would moderate and become a more familiar member of the company of nations, that has turned out to be clearly false. They're the most genocidal nation on the face of the earth. They can export violence and terror around the earth. And so Trump standing up to them at least has some legitimacy. It's possible that he understands people like that better than people who have higher SAT scores.
So that's David Brooks saying, you know, Donald Trump grew up in a rough and tumble world. He grew up in a world of thugs in the real estate business, the construction business. You're dealing with people that David Brooks refers to as thugs. And he says Donald Trump learned how to mix it up in that world. He learned how to be successful in that world. So maybe what David Brooks is saying, when he sees Kim Jong-un, he sees somebody that he recognizes. He says, I've dealt with bozos like this before in my past as a businessman. So he knows how to take on a guy like Kim Jong-un. And David Brooks acknowledges that he's produced some results. We have a better situation with Trump, with North Korea, than we would otherwise. So David Brooks, who never gives Donald Trump credit for anything, is now crediting him with producing a better situation than we've had in a long time with North Korea. And when he talks about Iran, you know, he said Obama had this dream that if he was just kinder and gentler to Iran, they would get the hint, and their gentler and kinder side would come out, and they would be moderate. And David Brooks says that has clearly turned out to be absolutely false. So good for Donald Trump, David Brooks says, for standing up to Iran. Trump standing up to them at least has some legitimacy, because David Brooks saying, look, this is a nation that exports terror, violence, and violence and terror around the earth. So maybe Donald Trump, so the people in Iran, they're thugs like Kim Jong-un. So David Brooks saying, hey, maybe Donald Trump understands these people better than all of these high IQ guys that are sitting in these ivory towers somewhere, just dealing in theory about international events. And Trump, meanwhile, is dealing in reality. Now let's go over to clip 8. This is George Will, who clearly here has a different view. And George Will is a Republican. He's supposed to be one of the smartest guys in the room. And if you have a question about that, just ask George Will. And he'll tell you he's one of the smartest guys in the history of the planet. He is the brains behind the conservative movement. A very, as you know, wears bow ties and speaks in a very aristocratic accent. And here he is talking about Trump, and listen to what he says about Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is an open book who's been reading himself to the country for 30 years. There are just no mysteries left, and he is this, as I said, this jumble of insecurities and partially or not at all really compensating vanities. He's a kind of mistake of nature, and he is what he is. But Mr. Pence, who has signed on to this, you know, the vice presidency is not an office that has a high dignity quotient at the best of times. But to sign on for this and to go out to Phoenix and to praise Arpaio, to pronounce himself honored, this wouldn't be so bad if Mr. Pence were not the darling of the evangelicals. Mr. Pence is a kind of combination between Elmer Gantry and Uriah Heep. Uriah Heep was the Dickens character, was forever pronouncing himself humbled about this and so very humble about that. If you're going to be, as Mr. Pence has decided to be, conspicuously pious and conspicuously moral, then you have to watch where you're planting your feet because there are mines all over the ground.
So George Will says Donald Trump is a mistake of nature. He's like misbegotten. He is a creature. He is a genetic aberration. And he says, but you think Donald Trump is bad? Take a look at Mike Pence. This guy is a hypocrite like Elmer Gantry, conspicuously pious. And so George Will got no use for either the president or the vice president. Be right back.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've been all over the country helping disaster victims who lose everything.
It's truly a blessing. I really don't have the words to express.
And yet they see a glimmer of hope when a volunteer shows up.
Building the home, that's the second reason we're here. The number one reason is to share the gospel and give them hope.
It's everything that's right in America. I mean, it really represents the best that we have to offer.
That's one of the main reasons for doing it, is being able to be the hands and feet of Jesus and coming out and working with so many wonderful volunteers.
I just feel like it's important in this day and age to teach a child how to serve.
Please go to our website, 8daysofhope.com, and click on Get Involved. Submit your email address, and the next time we go anywhere with a disaster, we'll invite you to come along as well.
I love coming in the job room because you can see these pieces of paper. They aren't just a piece of paper. Right. It's a family that's hurting, and it's a gospel opportunity.
You know, I just thank God, for this moment. I mean, I'll be back in my home, and I know it's going to be awesome.
Come love others with 8 Days of Hope.
The American Family Association invites you to a very special gathering of AFA friends from across America this fall at the Big Cedar Lodge in the Ozarks. The AFA retreat will be a relaxing time of fellowship and inspiration. Speakers include Sandy Rios, Dr. Ray Pritchard, Todd Starnes, Abraham Hamilton III, and Ed Vitagliano. And Dennis Jernigan will lead us in worship. Experience all of this in a beautiful setting that dates back to the 1920s, built originally to be a wilderness retreat for a prominent Missouri family. We hope you'll join us October 8th through the 11th at the rustic Big Cedar Lodge just south of Branson on Table Rock Lake. It promises to be a refreshing time of worship, teaching, fellowship, and fun. To register or for more information, visit afafoundation.net. Seating is limited, so register today. Hope to see you there.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher. Brian J. Fisher.
Howdy and welcome to this segment of Focal Point on American Family Radio. By the way, Tom Steyer, who is a billionaire trying to get Trump impeached, he actually stood up for Trump at a town hall meeting where one of the attendees compared Donald Trump to Hitler. And Tom Steyer, he wants to get Donald Trump impeached. He wants to get him removed from office. And Tom Steyer said, well, let's go a little easier. Let's go a little easy on the Trump-Hitler comparisons because Trump hasn't killed anybody. So maybe we ought to just lighten up on the deal. Here's some more politically correct lunacy. A fifth grade Texas student with autism, listen to this, was handcuffed and hauled away by police. You know what his crime was? He was playing with an imaginary rifle, which he apparently brandished at his art teacher who felt threatened. Somewhere, ladies and gentlemen, we got to get to some common sense here. This is ridiculous. This is a kid with autism. Probably doesn't even really know exactly what he's doing. And he doesn't even have a toy weapon. Doesn't have a weapon at all. It's completely imaginary. And what do? They cart him off in a police car in handcuffs. Unbelievable. Let's get a little bit of common sense in here somewhere. I got a story here about the radical roots of Mother's Day, if you can believe it. We just celebrated that yesterday. This is from the Daily Beast. I don't even know how much of this is exactly true because of the source, but Mother's Day was originally a subversive holiday. It didn't resemble today's Spring Sunday of hearts and flowers, forced sentiment, and pink-ribboned gifts, but was invented by political activists, suffragists, and pacifists to celebrate mothers as agents of change and to encourage moms to mount the barricades and claim power. Julia Ward Howe apparently was the first one to promote the idea of Mother's Day. She's the one that wrote the lyrics to the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and she wrote a proclamation in 1870 called a Mother's Day Proclamation, and she called on mothers to unite to become anti-war activists. So that was the initial purpose of Mother's Day, according to Julia Ward Howe. Let's just treat mothers as anti-war activists. And she said, and so she became a suffragist, wanted to give women the vote, because she said the only way to convince men in power that war is not acceptable is to give women the vote. Then about the same time, there was a woman in Virginia, community activist by the name of Ann Reeves Jarvis. She was organizing Mother's Day work clubs. So after her death in 1905, her daughter launched a drive to honor her mother's work with a Mother's Day holiday in May, which is the month of her birthday. The idea was taken up by churches, by state governments, and finally by a proclamation signed by President Woodrow Wilson in 1914, making the second Sunday in May Mother's Day. So suffragists, that is those who wanted to give women the vote, adopted this idea of a day devoted to mothers' work, not just in the home, but in the community and the life of the nation, by encouraging clergymen to devote their May Sunday sermons to supporting suffrage from the pulpit. I don't know how many did, but that was the beginning of Mother's Day. All right, so enough of that. Let's grab clip number 9. This is Tom Steyer. He's the guy I just talked about. He's the guy that defended Donald Trump when somebody at one of his town halls compared Trump to Hitler. And he said, well, look, let's not be so quick to go there because Donald Trump so far hasn't killed anybody. Adolf Hitler has the blood of 6 million Jews on his hands. How about we not make those silly comparisons? But here is an ad that Tom Steyer produced for Mother's Day. Ran all over the country yesterday. Let's listen.
I started noticing some issues with him maybe in middle school. This stealing started out small, a few dollars here and there. Not from me, oddly enough, but from less fortunate kids. He was never afraid to talk with girls. But things never really worked out for some reason. I worried when he went to college. But he came home often. I guess he never really learned to do his own laundry. It wasn't until I met his college buddies that I realized it might be too late. Only a mother can catch the signs early. This Mother's Day, talk to your child about the GOP. I wish I had.
So he's saying, I noticed the signs in my son, but it didn't dawn on me till I saw his college buddies that I had waited too long. It was too late now to reclaim my son from the clutches of the Republican Party. And remember some of the early signs, rather than giving money away, he was beating up homeless people in the alleys of the city and ripping off their money. And then the last thing, he and his college buddies are out there like Charlottesville carrying these tiki torches like they're white supremacists. So here's my wish, my message for Mother's Day. Please talk to your kids about the Republican
Did you notice
Party.
the tone of that in the music? They made it sound like it was a public service message.
Public service announcement.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah. One of the issues we cover here, well, let's go down to clip number 11. This is kind of funny because this is Maxine Waters. I, by the way, have been limited in my ability to refer to Maxine Waters by her preferred nickname.
Can I do it?
By the executive producer.
I'm afraid we'd get in trouble, too.
Of the party. What's that?
I'm afraid we'd get in trouble, too.
Yeah. But anyway, here is Maxine Waters. You are familiar with her, one of our favorite. I've even got the nickname written here. Are you trying to get me in trouble here?
No, that's just what I refer to her as.
I read this stuff now, Rob. You put that in front of me, I might just accidentally say it. Anyway, this is Maxine Waters on the floor of the House of Representatives going toe-to-toe with Representative Mike Kelly. Mike Kelly says something. He turns around to leave the floor, and that's when Maxine Waters starts going after him.
Mr. Kelly, please do not leave. Because I want you to know that I am more offended as an African-American woman than you will ever be. And this business about making America great again, it is your president that's dividing this country. And don't talk to me about the fact that we don't understand what happens on the automobile. No, I will not yield. No, I will not yield.
Okay.
Don't tell me that we don't understand. That's the attitude that's been given toward women time and time again.
The gentlelady will suspend. The chair wishes to remind all members that they are to address their remarks to the chair.
I respect the chair, but don't stop me in the middle when you didn't stop him in the middle. And so I shall continue. Don't you dare talk to me like that and think that somehow women don't understand what goes on the floor of automobile dealers.
Minded to direct her remarks to the chair. The gentlelady will continue in order.
I will continue to do that. However, I don't appreciate that you did not interrupt him when he was making those outrageous remarks about him knowing more about discrimination than I know about discrimination. I resent that, and I resent the remark about making America great again. He's down here making a speech for this dishonorable president of the United States of America. Having said that, I reserve the balance of my time, and no, I do not yield not 1 second to you. Not 1 second. Not 1 second to you.
Not 1 second to you. You know, and I wondered how long before that guy was going to stop using the term gentle lady.
Yeah.
Will the gentle lady yield? At some point, going to resort to a stronger adjective, I think. So that's Maxine Waters doing her Maxine Waters thing. Let's back.
That was nice. You did that. That was nice of you.
What?
Doing her Maxine Waters thing.
Yeah.
You know, that was good.
Yeah, I can behave when I need to.
Boy, it's hard over here. I'm wanting to.
Let's go to clip number 5. Get the latest in the Mueller update. What we have discovered, by the way, through the reporting done by Kimberly Strassel at the Wall Street Journal and by Sarah Carter, is that the Democrats, Obama's Department of Justice, had a spy inside the Trump campaign because there are documents that refer to a human source inside the Trump campaign. Now, when the FBI uses that term, or Department of Justice, human source, they're referring to somebody that's basically undercover for them. Looks like an ordinary person, might look like an ordinary businessman or an ordinary member of the team, but is actually collecting intelligence for them. So these documents that they've wanted to try to keep concealed are slowly coming to light, that they had a spy. This started under Obama. They had a spy in the Trump campaign for a long time. Now here is Darrell Issa talking to Maria Bartiromo about how the DOJ is trying to stonewall the intelligence community, and here's why he thinks they're doing it.
These chairmen are doing their job, Goodlatte, Nunes, and Gowdy, but the reality is they're being slow-walked till after the election in the hopes that the Democrats will take over the House or the Senate, and then the investigations will be covered up. No question in my mind that this would be something that would just go away if we lose the gavel.
So he's arguing that these Obama holdovers in the Department of Justice, Obama holdovers in the FBI, maybe even Rod Rosenstein, who basically was an Obama holdover, although Trump appointed him. He was in the Obama administration, I think, for the whole 8 years. At any rate, what he's arguing is that you've got this delayed release of these documents because those that are trying to slow walk these documents know it would be lethal to the Democrats if they surfaced. So here are these Obama holdovers. They're trying to They're trying to obstruct the release of these memos in the hopes that the Democrats will win in 2018, and then they can continue to go back and bury these memos. Remember, that was the hope of the Democrats with Donald Trump. One of the reasons they weren't concerned about all this stuff, this Peter Strzok, Lisa Page stuff, this Andrew McCabe stuff, one of the reasons they weren't worried about that stuff coming to light is they were convinced that Hillary was going to win. There wasn't going to be any need to cover that stuff up, or there wasn't going to be a need to explain it, because nothing was going to come of those investigations. They were going to get deep-sixed when they were in charge of everything. And then when Hillary surprisingly lost, and all of a sudden they were in a panic about how they cover their tracks, one of the ways they're doing it is to keeping these memos from being released. Back with your phone calls right after this. 888-589-8840. Write that number down, punch it in, 888-589-8840.
Washington Watch advances a culture where human life is valued and religious liberty thrives.
Hello, this is Tony Perkins, host of Washington Watch, right here on the American Family Radio Network, inviting you to join us each weekend for the weekend edition of Washington Watch for the latest from our nation's capital on what is happening as it pertains to faith, family, and freedom. You'll hear from policymakers, congressional leaders, and others each day, 4 p.m. Central Time. Be there.
You wish you could stop thinking about it, but you can't. It never quite leaves your thoughts. Even in the joyful moments, it's there. The sadness, shame, and sorrow. You know you can't go on like this, so don't. Phone the International Helpline for Abortion Recovery at 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point. Brian Fisher.
Howdy and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Number to call to join our conversation is 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. While you're calling in, let's play a couple of sound bites to round out our soundbite roster for the day. Here's Kimberly Strauss with clip number 6. She's the one I was talking about that unearthed the fact that the Obama administration had a spy inside the Trump administration.
What we have seen so far show that none of that's the case. What they were actually hiding were revelations that were hugely embarrassing to the FBI. For instance, the fact that it didn't fully inform the FISA court about the fact that it was basing its surveillance warrant on information that came from the rival presidential campaign. Well, at least interacting with the Trump campaign, what we know from a leak that appears to have come from law enforcement is that they're requesting information about a source. And that term is important because when the FBI talks about a source, they talk about someone that's your average citizen that uses their credentials or their job as a way of spying for the agency. So we can take that to mean that this is somebody that was interacting with the Trump campaign in some way and reporting back to the FBI, which means the FBI was using human intelligence to spy on a presidential campaign.
All right, the FBI, Barack Obama's FBI, using human intelligence to spy on a presidential campaign. One last clip. Donald Trump, Saturday night in Indiana, another one of these raucous rallies. People love Donald Trump. He's got a connection with his base that you can't duplicate it. You can't teach somebody how to develop. Either somebody has it, it's in them, it's innate with them, and Donald Trump has that. He connects with his audience. And that's why he won the presidential election, because of the way he was able to connect viscerally with the average American citizen. Here he is talking about Joe Donnelly, who's the Democrat that's scrambling to run for re-election in Indiana.
Now, if Joe Donnelly, Sleeping Joe, and the Democrats get back into power, remember what I said. They will raise your taxes. Who wants to raise your taxes? They will destroy your jobs, and they are going to knock the out of your borders, and that's already. We have the worst immigration laws in the history of mankind. We're slowly getting them changed. We want to make it quick. So give me some reinforcements, please, okay?
Give me some reinforcements. So that was a plea to the Republican base to get out and vote in November of 2018. All right, let's go to the phones. Let's begin with David in Princeton, West Virginia. David, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian, I just wanted to say nothing real deep, but that voice a while ago, I couldn't help but call in and tell you that was Mad Max.
All right, David.
Nobody told me I couldn't say it.
You're right, David. All right, you've done my listening audience a great service, David, and I cannot thank you enough. All right, appreciate that, David. There's a pretty creative caller for you. All right, let's go to Sonny in Kanab, Utah. Sonny, welcome. What's on your mind?
That's why we leave the delay on.
Brian?
Yes, ma'am.
I was just messaging you on Facebook, too, because it took me an hour to get in on the telephone. We have a wonderful alternative to vote for here instead of Mitt Romney.
Uh-huh.
We have a Dr. Mike Kennedy is running against him. He is a state senator, and he would be a wonderful conservative candidate for we Utah Christians and conservative Christians, and I'm praying that if anybody's listening for Utah, please vote for Dr. Mike.
Now let me ask you this, Sonny. You live there in Utah, obviously, and you're not a Mitt Romney fan. You like this guy? His name is Mike Kennedy, or
Mike Kennedy.
Kennedy.
He's a doctor.
So the question I got for you, Sonny, do you have any idea what the lay of the land is right now? What's the mood in Utah? Is Romney going to just kind of waltz to victory, or do you think that a conservative like Kennedy would actually have a chance against Romney there?
They had either a caucus or some kind of a big meeting earlier, a couple months ago in Salt Lake City, and Kennedy beat out Romney.
That's right. I remember that, Sonny.
Yes.
I remember that, Sonny. Yeah, so he couldn't even win a caucus, a Republican caucus. Mitt Romney couldn't.
Right.
Okay, so he may be in a fight for his life in Utah.
Yes.
All right, Sonny, great. Appreciate that. That's boots on the ground intelligence right there. Not that Sonny would be one of our sources, you understand, our human sources that we have planted to spy on the Romney campaign. We don't do that sort of thing. Anyway, Chris in Memphis, Texas. Is that Memphis, Texas, Chris? Is that right?
No, sir, Tennessee.
Okay, Memphis, Tennessee. All right. What's on your mind, Chris?
Yes, sir. Well, I just wanted to say the move of the embassy to Jerusalem was the absolute right thing to do. Jerusalem, Israel is a unique country, just like Australia, China, Great Britain. It is unique. It has its own people. It has its own nation. It is a nation. And so it is a nation of culture. It is a nation of Judeo values. And I just wanted to say that personally for myself, I find it troubling that people are saying that God is going to reward us or God is going to have favor for us just for doing that. And I don't look at it that way. I look at it that this is what needed to be done, and we did it because it was the right thing to do. It was always the right thing to do, and I don't think that it's right for people to say that, we're going to be rewarded. Now, if that is God's intention that he will reward us, then that's fine. No problem. But absolutely, it was just the right thing to do.
All right, Chris. Well, you know, and they say virtue is its own reward. So if it was the right thing to do, maybe regardless of whether there's some kind of particular reward in it for us, we can take the satisfaction in knowing that something that should have been done, something that needed to be done, has in fact been done. All right, Chris, appreciate that. Thank you. Let's grab a call from Mark in Dallas, Texas. Mark, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian. I just have a question maybe you could answer. Why wasn't the embassy always in Jerusalem from the beginning?
Yeah.
Well, I do not have an answer to that. Do you have any idea, Jeff?
No, I don't.
You know, I really don't know, other than it might have been controversial from the very beginning. Well, I'll tell you here, part of the deal is that I think the portion that the embassy is in, I don't think Israel even controlled that until after the 1967 war. Yeah. So the property that the embassy is located on was not even under the control of Israel until the 1967 war with Jordan. So probably the embassy was put in Tel Aviv because that was the part that the government of Israel controlled. And now that they've expanded their control by defeating Jordan, and remember, that's a legitimate way to get control of territory in international law. Somebody attacks you and you defeat them, you get to take their territory. That's just the way it works. You don't want to lose your territory, then you better not pick on somebody that's going to defeat you in battle. So Israel has the moral right to every square inch of territory that they inhabit right now. All right, Mark, that's the best solution I've got for you right now. Maybe we'll come up with some information that'll give us more intelligence about that as we go. Thanks for the call. Let's go to John. Welcome, John. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
I just want to tell everybody that the FBI lets heroin and Mexican drugs come into this country and lands in Citrus County. They fly over my house in U.S. Air Force planes, and they distribute it to the Muslims, and the Muslims distribute heroin and Mexican drugs across this country. And
now,
it's been going on since Obama was the president.
Now, you're saying that the FBI is behind this? They're a part of this?
Yes. There's 7 floors getting paid off to let Mexican drugs come into the country. They've been getting paid off for 8 years now that I know of.
All right, John. Well, that's a pretty humongous accusation to make. I have not come across anything like that, so I'm going to have to reserve judgment. I'm not saying that what you're saying is not true, but I'm going to have to do a little more research and see if I can get a little more information about that. But I appreciate your call. Thank you for that. Let's go to Edith in Jackson, Tennessee. Edith, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi, Brian. According to Washington Watch, last Thursday, I believe it is, Congress is intentionally blocking any efforts to improve the security on our electric grid. I was wondering if you could enlighten the listeners on this issue and maybe advise us before the election.
Yeah. Well, again, there is a real problem with the vulnerability of our electric grid. You know, hackers that know what they're doing can hack into an electric grid. If they know what they're doing, they could actually disable a part of the electric grid. I don't know how much they could disable, but they could cause some disruptions, maybe some pretty widespread disruptions. The other thing that we're vulnerable to is what's called an EMP. This is an electromagnetic pulse, and this is where you got to be concerned about people like North Korea and Iran. If they were to, and it only takes 33 minutes for a nuclear weapon to be launched from Baghdad and get to the territorial United States. And if they detonated a bomb over the center of the United States, it would immediately disable our entire electrical grid. That electromagnetic pulse would send us back instantaneously to the 17th century. So we need to harden our power grids, and we have not done enough of that yet. All right, let's finish by talking to Mike in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Mike, got 30 seconds. Hit me with your best shot.
First-time caller, long-time listener.
Thank you.
Just want to let you know I appreciate you.
Thank you.
There's a guy named Larry Clayman. He's a former judge. He's also ran for Senate in Florida. He says that Jeff Sessions is being blackmailed. That's why he's pretty much been ineffective.
I got 10 seconds, Mike. What does he think people have on Jeff Sessions?
Something to do with the Russia collusion.
Okay.
That he talked to the Russians himself.
All right. Okay. Appreciate and I got a lot of confidence in Larry Klayman. I'm reluctant to believe that Jeff Sessions is being blackmailed, but who knows? Stranger things have happened. That's it for today. God bless you. See you here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.